Good evening and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world listening to The Caring Economy with me, Toby Usnik. Today, it's a really fun honor for me to have Pam Matthews with us. She is the Executive Director of IEBA, which is the International Entertainment Buyers Association. And before that, had some great work at Ryman Auditorium, which many of our listeners will know from the Grand Ole Opry. But before we even go into that, I want to welcome Pam and then tell us how we can connect the dots of her background, which includes everything from road shows with Ozzy Osbourne and Kiss, to a Rhodes Scholarship with Christ Church, Oxford, to the Winonas and Special Ops. So welcome to The Caring Economy, Pam Matthews, and please give us a sort of sweet and condensed bio, focusing a little bit on some of your pivots in life, please.
Well, thank you, Toby. Pleasure to be with you. Spend some time talking about important things. I'm not sure that there's much more important than the question of why we are here, what's our purpose, how can I leave this thing better than I found it? Anyway, so the question that you asked was how I ended up on this really strange journey. And I think there are two answers to that. The first one is my mother's desire to make sure that her daughter did not struggle under the same constraints and operate in the same paradigm that she did. I think it's important to remember the things that women could not do in the 40s and 50s. Own property, have credit cards. There were many things that we could not do without our husband's consent. So that's the environment my mother grew up in. And she also grew up not wealthy. She did not have privilege. Mm-hmm. So she married into that. And I think she wanted to make sure that her daughter had her, could make her own way. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing that is noteworthy is my father was in the grocery business in Memphis, Tennessee. While the grocery business is a noble profession, it's not terribly exciting. And in Memphis, Tennessee in the 1960s and 70s was an exciting period for music. So I literally saw Elvis Presley drive down the street on a motorcycle. Isaac Hayes came into the grocery store, Rufus Thomas. Like it was... If you didn't grow up in that culture or in a culture similar to it, and you just didn't see like music stars and have music all around you, you might not know what that feels like. So when I was in high school, my best friend, one of my best friends was Jeff Dunn, and his dad was Duck Dunn, the famous bass player. Yes. So Duck and Miss Dunn traveled quite a bit, and I was their girl Friday when they were on the road. I would bring the mail in from the mailbox. I would check all the messages on the Codaphone. I would make sure the pool was clean. So when it became time for me to actually get a real job, Miss Dunn got me an interview with Bob Kelly at Mid-South Concerts.
Wow.
And so that started me on the music path. And then I know that you like to talk about pivots. And that sort of is my story, is all those connectors.
Absolutely.
So Jeff's mom got me my first job interview. Bob Kelly got me the job with Kiss. Once I was in that segment, the Kiss job got me the Ozzy job, just so forth and so on. It's, because when we talk about pipeline, and I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, I think that those connectors, those relationships. Now, provided the fact that I did a really good job.
Yes.
Everywhere I landed. Like I flourished in those environments, so I just kept getting more opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And I suspect that throughout your life, you've also taken those along with you who've done the same. You've mentored others as you've been mentored and held them to high standards and challenged them to sort of flourish.
Absolutely. I had this conversation with someone last week where I just started naming off all the people in this town, like Fielding was my clerk at Flood, and Mallory worked with me here at IEBA, and Trevor worked with me here at IEBA, and Sally worked at the Opry House when I worked at the Ryman. It's like just on and on and on and on.
I love that. I think of that as sort of all those connections in life and all those clocked hours. I think of as sort of the anti-wrinkle cream of aging. It makes you feel good about the wrinkles because along the way you've actually made a great legacy for yourself and with others.
In fact, maybe I was talking about, I was going to do this podcast with you, with my cousin who's visiting from New York. And maybe that's when I said that the question that you say is, what is my legacy?
Yes.
And at my age, because I'm facing the last 10 years of my career, I asked myself that, what's my legacy going to be?
Well, I can sense already you've got much to do after those 10 years, but in that spirit of legacy and sort of past, present, and future, I do have to acknowledge our mutual friend Frank Wing, great talent agent who also grew up in Texas, South Texas, with my spouse, and who's just awesome. And like you and I, shares this commitment to higher purpose and trying to figure out how can we use our trade and our gifts to enhance the larger community and the planet. So tell us a little bit, actually, before we finish off the past, how did the Rhodes Scholarship fit in at Christ Church? Because that's also a fabulous accomplishment.
So back to my mom and making sure that her daughter had every advantage. My mom taught me how to type by touch when I was 8 years old. She sent me to Evelyn Wood's speed reading class when I was 11 or 12. And it was like a continuing education. So she took me to this community center and I was the only child. So she also made sure I was well connected with my guidance counselor at school, who put me in tons of competition. I did debate, I did Model UN, I did, Hugh, do you remember Hugh O'Brien's Youth Foundation?
Yes.
Okay, so I was in that. One of the Hearsts have a Senate Youth Program. It's not William Randolph Hearst, it's another Hearst.
Is the family still, or?
Yeah, it's still the family, yes. The men passed away a little early in life and their wives continued to run the foundations. So I won a Hearst scholarship and went to work at the Senate in Washington, D.C. When my senator was Howard Baker. Who became Secretary of State and, a great Tennessean. So all those things just sort of build a foundation for being able to compete scholastically. And I just was championed by my mom and by my guidance counselor.
And then you come back to the States, and it sounds like, having lived abroad, studied abroad, that your heart is in Nashville. Is that a fair statement, or?
So I've lived in California twice for 2 really brief periods, but especially when my grandmothers were alive, I didn't like to be too terribly far away.
Yes.
I really like the comfort of knowing that I can get in a car and see my elderly relatives in 2 hours.
I love that.
So everyone lived, I've not lived with immediate family in Nashville, but I've been within 2 or 2.5 hours of them for most of my life.
Right. We're all dealing with aging family members and friends, families, and I appreciate that more than ever now. We'll just say, ladies and gentlemen, we are with Pam Matthews, who is the executive director of IEBA, the International Entertainment Buyers Association. Tell our listeners, Pam, what is that? Because if you're not from inside the industry, it sounds almost like something from the United Nations. But give a scope about this awesome nonprofit for the entertainment industry.
Yeah, so we're a trade organization. Every industry, every sector has a trade organization. If you were a dentist, you would join the National Association of Dentists. So in entertainment and live entertainment, there's IEBA, then there's a national or international association for venue managers. There's an international association for fairs and expos, and we are the association for agents and talent buyers. And what you probably know, the way you would interpret talent buyers would be a concert promoter, like Live Nation and AEG, and depends on where you are in the country, but.
And how do you compare and contrast entertainment? I'm thinking in my mind, music talent with you, but how do you compare and contrast it with, say, television talent theater talent. Does your organization represent all of that film?
No, just live entertainment. So we intersect with sports in that most every stadium and arena is a multi-purpose venue where they often have a sports team that's resident, but do tons of concerts. So that's where we intersect. But agents will generally represent film and television, and then personal appearances, which is live in concert.
And I saw you.
Definitely comedians. We have lots of comedians, family shows. So Feld Entertainment, which owned Ringling Brothers until they retired that brand. Disney on Ice, Bicycle Motocross, Monster Jam, all those things fall into.
Very cool. I want to come back in a bit, maybe to Howard Stern and Sirius and what's going on there. I'm actually a later in life fan of Howard Stern. And speaking of comedians, it's just really amazing how much clout he has in the Sirius radio network, but also just amongst popular opinion, I think.
I think, well,
right now.
Right. I mean, but I think that all sports and entertainment in this culture right now, in this point in history, sports and entertainment figures, let's just call them celebrities if you want, have so much clout, so much clout, which for me, in my current role at IEBA, is wonderful because I get to borrow that influence.
Yeah. Well, can you talk a little bit more about that, Pam? How does one deal with that clout responsibly? One of the things that's drawn me to Howard Stern more recently is his, I think, very informed and objective advocacy work around COVID-19 and around Black Lives Matter. And that's not necessarily the stereotype that he would have had, say, a decade or 20 years ago as the shock jock, I don't believe. But how does a celebrity, a talent, how do they manage that? Is it their teams behind them? Is it come from within, I would presume, or is it a little bit of both?
Right. So we sort of skipped over the fact that I spent 12 years in artist management where I worked for the Judds and Winona in her solo career and then with the Judds again. So my experience is at a certain level, you as a entertainer will either form your own foundation or charity or join one. And you may have a 4 or 5 year commitment, and then you'll move on to something else. Think about all of the great actresses who have been UNICEF ambassadors.
Yeah.
Like you pick something and you may stick with it your entire career, or you may just really do that focus for a 3 to 5 year period and move on. But many artists have their own foundations, charitable foundations, because you will get, as an entertainer, as a celebrity of influence, you will get asked to support everything.
Yes.
And you just can't. My job really as a manager was to say no.
Mm-hmm.
That was my primary role, is all the questions came in and I said no to most of them, and had to be very selective about when there was a yes.
Yes.
And the same is true with companies as well. So Gaylord, which is now Ryman Hospitality Properties, publicly held company. It's the only publicly held company I ever worked for, is the owner of the Ryman Auditorium and the Grand Ole Opry and WSM Radio and properties like Hee Haw, things like that from the 70s. So, they had partners. And as employees, so their partnership was with the United Way. And we were charged as leaders, part of the leadership team, to pick. So I did junior achievement for a while, and that taught me how to do literacy, adult literacy, so that I moved into that segment. And it turns out I'm good at that. I'm good at adult literacy. I am not. Winona Judd can go into a children's hospital and do the most amazing work. I've never seen anybody as gifted as she is with compassion in that area. Yeah. I can't do it. I cry, I get upset. Like, I'm not of service in a children's hospital. I do much better with college age students. I do really well with homeless. I do really well with women who are incarcerated. I don't do well with sick kids.
but that's a great sign of accomplishment. I think that you know yourself and you know your strengths and weaknesses, and you can declare them and work with them.
Yeah, but it's trial and error. It was for me
Yeah.
because I worked with Winona, so I followed her to children's hospitals, and we went with some of her background vocalists. And there was one day we were on the elevator, and she said, "You don't have to come anymore. You're no good at this. You're not good at it." So then Naomi was a big advocate of homeless, and we went to shelters, and turns out I can cook for 100 people, and I'm very much of service in that sector.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You mentioned the sports earlier. I've also found in my career that the leagues and the athletes are incredibly tuned into this as well, into their fans and into the serving concept, because they also get a lot of incoming requests and they can't do all of them. So I think both the leagues and the athletes do a pretty amazing job of being responsible with their fame and their fortune.
Some more than others, but that's the case with anything. But yes. And in fact, on my list of like heroes of corporate responsibility is Dwayne Wade.
Yes.
And what a leader. And
yes.
What a powerhouse couple with Gabrielle. I mean, they just have taken their clout and said, watch this.
And also during COVID, it's been how amazing he always looks so buff no matter what he does.
That's a gift.
Tell me about the entertainment industry writ large from your perch and how you are really addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is it a Sisyphean task, or are you able to really move the meter, do you think?
Time will tell, Toby. Time will tell. I think that we focused on diversity and inclusion maybe only 5 to 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. Shameful. I'm ashamed to say that. And the conversation now is really equity and equality. Mm-hmm. And I think that some of that has to do with clients. So if I am a client and let's just say I'm Cardi B, I'm going to hold my agency responsible for, she doesn't want to walk into the office at CAA in Beverly Hills and not see anybody that looks like her. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring up CAA several times. That's Creative Artist Agency. Sure. And I'm going to just tell you a few. So again, Dwayne Wade on the sports side. So they're a full service agency. So they have sports, they have film and television, and then they have musical acts. So in the comedy sector, they have Colin Jost, Jimmy Fallon, Jordan Peele, Trevor Noah. Mm-hmm. In music, they have A$AP Rocky, Anderson .Paak, Ariana Grande, Barbra Streisand, Cardi B, Harry Styles, Jennifer Lopez, Katy Perry, and Lady Gaga. So when I run that list, you have a feeling for what their clients stand for, and they're going to bring that into their partnerships. Mm-hmm. And so I think that has something to do with it. I also think that as the music business has evolved, I mean, rock and roll is really not that old. Mm-hmm. I really think of it really as being the 60s. So it's really only 50, 60 years old. And as it has evolved and become an industry, not just like guys selling tickets out of the guitar store, and it's become big business and a global business. I think that's important, a global business. And as we mature as leaders in the business, we turn to what is my legacy? What can I do with this influence?
Do you, in your tenure, not just at IEBA, but before that, have you seen the rise of talent that is individuals who are building the legacies? Have you seen things speed up or be amplified because of the technology or because of the globalization of the marketplace? Is it kind of the same old practices apply, or does an entertainer today really have to have a social media plan, a strategy, or is it still okay just to have a gift and want to do your thing?
So here, in the prep questions, for those of you who might be on Toby's podcast in the future, you will get some prep questions. In the prep question, Toby asked me, "Do I have any quotes that from famous people along the way?" And one of my favorite ones is, "Many are called, but few are chosen." So I guarantee you that there are 5 baristas in Nashville, Tennessee, right this minute, who are wonderful songwriters and beautiful vocalists. But we'll never know. Like their grandmother knows that they sing great and their boyfriend knows that they're talented guitarists, but past that, we just won't know. I think work ethic has a whole lot to do with it because it's a skill. I mean, you mentioned Dwayne Wade and how you were impressed that during COVID, he was able to maintain that physicality. Well, I guarantee you, he has not been having, the diet that I've had in COVID, where I had donuts for 6 weeks. Like every day, it's just like, screw it, I'm having donuts.
COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot. It's hard work. Success is hard work. It doesn't come to anybody easy. To maintain it, you might have a fluke. There could be, what's the phrase? One-hit wonders. We all can name our favorite one-hit wonders, just roll them off. But to have a sustained career is hard work.
Do you think that fame is a double-edged sword? Do most people thrive with it? Do most people perish with it? Or do they just kind of fade off because they've only had a one-hit kind of wonder thing?
So remember the movie Notting Hill? Like when she says the fame thing, that's not real. That's not real. I think that's true. I think yes, it's a double-edged sword, and you have to learn how to wield that sword. You really do, or else it will take you down because you go from being this thing. You mentioned Howard Stern and how you have watched him evolve. I think that Howard Stern, like that wasn't Howard Stern. That was a character that Howard Stern played for all those years, and that he outgrew that character and just couldn't do it anymore. So I think that there's the public persona, which is a difficult taskmaster. That's a hard burden to bear, being famous. Paparazzi is just horrible. And I mean, we all had an experience at some point, perhaps it was, in the 5th grade, where someone said something about us that didn't even know us, and it wasn't true. So just imagine if that was really basically your entire life, was people that you don't know having an opinion about you.
With an amplified platform because of social media.
I think that social media gives artists, I'm going to just use artists in general, a little bit more control than we used to have in the tabloid days. They get to craft their own narrative a whole lot more. But again, it is a lot of work. I mean, every artist has a team, a social media team that crafts that for them.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're with Pam Matthews, who's the Executive Director of IEBA, the International Entertainment Buyers Association, here on The Caring Economy. Pam, I want to stick with a subset of the music industry and artists. I grew up around country and Western music, not so much in my immediate house, but with my grandfather all the time, spending summers with him. And my younger brother is a huge aficionado, my brother Troy. And it's always struck me from those days you talked about Hee Haw. I used to watch it regularly with my grandfather. And there's something about the genre to me which is authentic. That's part of what makes it so American, makes it so special. So it feels to me, and I want you to challenge me on this if it's fair to say or not, it feels to me that country and Western music artists have been the real deal all along. Like it's not a genre you can fake it.
I would 100% agree with you. Again, I have lived in Nashville, Tennessee for 35 years. I could live in New York or Los Angeles and make a really good living, but I prefer to live here. Again, I'm a native Tennessean. My people have been in Tennessee since 1797, so those roots run really deep. But I would agree with you. I think it is what you see is what you get. I would also say that many country artists, there's a songwriting element to it. So there's a huge songwriter community in Nashville that has existed for a very long time. And so that makes it, if you're singing your own songs, then that lends to the authenticity.
I also have a hunch now coming out of COVID-19 that what we're going to see is an even greater appreciation for local consumption, local talent, supporting local businesses, and that authenticity is only going to make Nashville even more popular place to go. That people are going. I know it's been growing in staggering numbers in terms of population and development over the past decade or two. I think you're going to see more of that. Are you seeing more clogged traffic there?
Oh, yes. So again, I've been here for 35 years, so this is the third growth spurt that I've witnessed. There was a big growth spurt in 1991, and you should think of that in terms of Garth Brooks. So Garth Brooks and Alan Jackson and all those hat acts. And this has been a sustained growth spurt, and it's exciting. It does, I don't think you meant this metaphorically, but it does clog up the traffic. It literally does. And it is a different town than it was 5 years ago, but it is exciting. And it is a mecca, which is also exciting.
So sticking with the country and Western music in Nashville, Lil Nas and Old Town Road last year was the phenomenon that just took the world by surprise, I think, in the best way. And his being African-American captured a lot of the headlines for country and Western music. His being gay, lesser so, from what I've read and followed. But can you give us a sense of where he fits into the entertainment industry now, and why now he was able to take that talent and get, in addition to hard work, get where he got? Or
yeah, well, so he created all of that with technology sitting in the bedroom of his apartment. Like, he sampled all that. And it's interesting to me that you think of Lil Nas X as being a country act, because I don't necessarily do. There was some controversy that he was on the country charts and he didn't belong on the country charts. So he wouldn't recruited Billy Ray Cyrus for some, respectability or credibility in the country genre. From a country perspective in that era, I think more of Kane Brown. Do you know who Kane Brown is?
I don't, but please tell my listeners and me.
Many folks will know who Kane Brown. He's an arena headliner, a young man. Again, discovered via social media. He would do covers on a YouTube channel, and he has a beautiful voice and is just charismatic in that quiet sort of way. But you're drawn to him. I've seen him perform live in big settings, and I've also been in a room with him, and he's just a lovely young man and not afraid of the hard work. And so that one to me is I don't think that his peers see race, and it doesn't matter to, like, that voice of his, he's from, I think, North Georgia, is authentically country. And I don't think that his fans see race at all.
Interesting. As a tangent, I was watching a PBS documentary this week on Sammy Davis Jr., who started at age 3 and worked every day since. And he dared to cross a line by, you talked about Kane doing covers. Sammy started to do spoofs of, sorry, what do you call it?
Parodies?
Imitating white celebrities like Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney. And that was a bold thing to do back then. It was one thing if a white person were to do it, another thing if a black person did, but that became part of his shtick. And his career, he just continued to work his whole life, was, I just think, a fascinating entertainer. And I wonder, so there was Sammy then, we have Lil Nas X, Kane Brown today. What do you see coming down the pike? Is there, I should say, where are you seeing, and where do you think the next talent will come from, male or female, country and Western genre or elsewhere? Is it going to be via TikTok? Is it going to be from the old discovered in a soda fountain model? Is it going to be the barista in Nashville? Where do you think the best odds are for a young talent to try and make it?
So there are the two outlets to like the coffee shop or the club.
Mm-hmm.
There's that, and that's really word of mouth. So I would see uh, Elaine performing at a coffee house or a club, and I would think that there's something super special there. So I would call Frank and say, we need to find out when Elaine is playing again, and we need to go see her. And that's been the model for several decades. And then there's certainly the social media. There's, YouTube, TikTok.
Yeah.
But there's so much noise in that space, it's hard to cut through. It really is a game of chance. Like I said, there's 6 super talented girls making coffee in Nashville right this minute.
Yeah. How does IEBA, how does one join? Are there filters? One has to be recognized in certain ways to be a member? Are there standards that are clearly printed, so to speak?
They are not necessarily clearly printed, but in order to find us, you would have to be an industry professional. We do have a membership segment that is educators and students,
Mm-hmm.
and those students are usually in music business programs all across the world. But because we live so far under the radar, you would have to be a professional in order to find us.
Great, I love that. So you mentioned students. I know that you're very generous as an organization with your foundation. You raise money, you give scholarships, you have a philanthropic arm.
We do.
In addition, you can maybe share a little bit of that, Pam, but as importantly, how are your members moving the needle on things like Black Lives Matter and gender parity and the like?
So I want to go back to CAA for a second, because I really admire what they've done in the last 5 years. So they have an Amplify program, and they host a town hall every year. They have a new program called the Hub, where they fly in students from all across the country to spend an immersive weekend in Nashville. They fly in their worldwide head of music from LA, and he spends time with them, where we just basically teach them some basics and expose them to different companies, record labels, business managers, live professionals, so that pipeline, that's a conversation that we have all the time. We have got to establish a better pipeline. CAA is actually doing really well with that. There are a number. So there's She Is the Music. There is, let's see, a brand new one that I'm really excited about, and it is Diversify the Stage. And it is Noelle Skaggs from Fits in the Tantrum. So she has just established this organization, and it'll have an educational element where it's a 2-year program. And then also on the other side of it, there's a registry. So if you are in an underrepresented class, that's how legally we think of it, as class, you can register. So if I don't know, like I'm on a mission, I'm going to make sure that my road crew is 50% women.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't done that before. Where do I go find those women?
Mm-hmm.
So we're sort of codifying it and creating those directories.
Right.
Then the other thing too, yeah.
No, please.
Then the other thing too is it really has to start with education, because if you are going to confront and tackle equity issues, you have to understand the root causes of social injustice. Like you can't just, like, you have to take a step backwards before you can take a step forward. So that is housing, nutrition, education, the justice system, voter suppression. So we have taken on those. I know that just for example, Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick are very active in voter suppression. Like that they've taken that on for a decade now. We at IEBA have taken the education route. So as you mentioned, we give away between 25 and 30 scholarships every single year. We've endowed millions of dollars of scholarships. They're permanently endowed, so they'll exist in perpetuity. We have educational workshops. It just creating the next level. You can't just say, I want to go hire from the LGBTQ community. Well, there has to be, trained, seasoned professionals there.
Yes, and representation so does matter. I was struck yet again this week with the CEO of Wells Fargo, you may have seen, basically saying that there's a pipeline issue with Black recruits because there aren't any. And of course, we know it's not true, but we have to really challenge ourselves, all of us. And in my book, The Caring Economy, on this podcast, and in my consulting, I try to always challenge those I'm working with to think about both the root causes and the symptoms. Right now in the COVID era, we need to deal with the symptoms big time right away. But then we need to also be thinking about the R&D and all the great professional industry that has been there in the past. It needs to be, I think, learn from this and make sure that we don't have this kind of pandemic again. So I love hearing you say that. It's so much about the root causes as well as the symptoms.
Did you see the city report that came out this week?
No.
Closing the racial inequality gap?
From which organization?
Citi.
Oh, Citi.
Uh-huh.
Okay. No, but they have their first female CEO now coming on, the first of the major Wall Street banks.
Yes, and they have Raymond McGuire, who is the vice chair, who's great. So they have a pathway forward. I'm looking at it just briefly. Not addressing racial gaps between Blacks and whites has cost the U.S. economy up to $16 trillion over the past 20 years.
Yep.
Again, wage gap. It's everything that we're talking about.
So,
Black students, housing. And then I also think that this is very important. If we're not investing in Black businesses, then we're not investing in the community and we're not investing in the future.
Yes, and I think without going too far into politics, I think it's incumbent upon each voter in this country to look at the economic policies of the candidates, both federal and down the ballot, to figure out who's really advocating for the economy they want to be a part of or have been left behind by.
And I think some of that might begin with learning how government works in the United States. Like because federal policy is enormous, we all know that, but your laws on everything vary state to state.
Yes.
So if your state Senate and your state House of Representatives is not representing who you are as a voter, you need to get active in that.
Yes. And the other reason I like that focus on going down the ballot, Pam, is that I think coming out of COVID-19, it's going to be the local that is one of our ways forward. And by which I mean, we can cross party lines in our own community if the other person on the PTA or running for mayor is someone that I know, that I grew up with, who may not look like me, but he or she has delivered. I can trust him. I can set aside the party lines. The further we go up to the federal level, it becomes harder and harder, I think, for people sometimes to cross party lines. Whereas I think at the local level, it's a great way to get into the system. It's a great way to affect change. And it's a great way to, I think, build the bridges that we need to build so desperately in this nation to come back together.
Well said. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to let Pam Matthews, the Executive Director of IEBA, the International Entertainment Buyers Association, have the last word today on the caring economy. Pam, any sort of final thoughts or websites or suggestions you'd like us to follow up on or read up on?
Let's see. So my final thought is you can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to show up. And even if you aren't good at something in the beginning, registering people to vote or working at the homeless shelter, find your place. You can always tell what people care about because it is where they spend their time and it is where they spend their money. And perhaps if you don't think about that on a weekly basis, maybe this afternoon you would just think about, what do I care about? And if you don't know, take a look at where you spend your time and your money.
Well said, Pam Matthews. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, again, Pam Matthews, the Executive Director of IEBA, the International Entertainment Buyers Association, here on the Caring Economy with Toby Usnik. Thank you again so much, Pam.
So much fun. So much fun. Thank you.